you'll have a lot of well-known people who have made Sutton, for instance, their home. Everybody from Marilyn Monroe and Bill Blass, Bobby Short, the pianist.
Welcome to the John and Jonathan Sell NYC podcast, where experienced expert New York City real estate brokers John Gasdaska and Jonathan Conlon break down what's happening in the market, what you need to know whether you're a buyer, seller, or agent, and their insight into the future with a little bit of fun along the way. In this episode, John and Jonathan are discussing some of the smallest neighborhoods in Manhattan, Sutton Place and Beekman Place. Though they might only be a few blocks wide, there's tons of history and reasons you might just want to call these neighborhoods home.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the John and Jonathan Sell NYC podcast. How you doing, John?
Jonathan, couldn't be better. How about yourself?
Really? Couldn't be better. That is a...
Well, I could, but I like to lie.
You look, you're in a different position here.
I am in a different position because...
do tell.
Not to dwell on it, but I had a little foot surgery, so I'm kind of convalescing for the week, and my foot's up with an ice pack on it. But otherwise, I'm fantastic.
And we were joking about it earlier today. It will be, I'm sure, the first of many operations that we share together in our tenure as we both get a little longer in the tooth.
I loved it. Earlier today, we were commiserating about our ailments in our bodies. And I'm like, oh my God, we're going into a next chapter together. I thought that was pretty funny.
The bionic chapter as we replace different pieces of our body.
Yeah, but we're still going. And that's not going to get in the way of us doing transactions. So
it'll be a competition as to see who can hold out the longest before we replace a hip. I think that's where we landed on that.
Yeah. So what are we going to talk about today?
So today we're going to do one of our neighborhoods, but today we're going to do a double session. We're going to hit Beekman and Sutton Place. So because
I just want to interrupt you 1 second. I bet you people don't even know where Beekman Place is.
Many people don't. People are like, I don't know, Beekman Place. Then there's Beekman. There's a Beekman Road Beekman Street or something downtown.
Beekman Street downtown. Yeah.
Yeah. I've had people, Beekman Street downtown. I'm like, no, Beekman Place. So both very small, Beekman smaller geographically speaking, but sit in that far East 50s corridor, just above the UN, so technically 49th Street, but up to the 59th Street Bridge there. So we figured we would just talk about them together because they have similarities, but also some differences. And but geographically, like I said, there's not a lot of area to cover. So we didn't want to just do one or the other. We figured let's just roll them together because you know what? It's our podcast and we can do it if we want.
Of course. And we've been fortunate to sell in both neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And so we know them quite well. And simply over the years, we've had clientele who have been selling their apartments and then other people who have wanted to buy there. So I'll jump in and talk a little bit about the location of the parameters around Sutton Place. So Sutton Place will begin on the south end, 53rd Street, and end at 59th Street, and from First Avenue over to the East River or to Sutton Place. That's the little street there. It's a little pocketed neighborhood. It is extremely quiet.
Yeah.
It's very pretty.
Yeah.
And it is, so there's not a tremendous amount of services over there. And it can be, it's lovely place to be.
And just to orient people, the Sutton Place is actually, it's the tail end of York Avenue. So people are more familiar with York, which is a longer street, which is that next after First Avenue. So south of 59th Street Bridge, it's another confusing data point, Sutton Place, and then Sutton Place South, which is divided by 57th Street, right? But either way, on the water, and actually a couple of the buildings that are built literally right up to the water over the FDR, which is an interesting perspective on Queens, and shooting down the river is a really cool vantage point. So,
do you want to just quickly jump in and say where Beekman Place is in comparison to Sutton?
I love your lead-ins. They're so
not
great.
to
like
Not to steer the conversation, but
How about you talk about where Beekman Place is? Uh,
You're my Ethel to my Lucy. What can I say?
so Beekman Place sits just south of Sutton. So runs Beekman Place is actually a street which runs from 49th to 51st Street, but Beekman Place as a neighborhood actually encompasses 52nd Street. So which in the tail end of 52nd Street, you have some iconic buildings like the River House, the Campanile, which is where Greta Garbo's apartment just sold and such. Um, but also a little bit smaller, really 3 square blocks. And again, east of First Avenue, just north of the UN there. So nearby, of course, you have Midtown East to the west. You've got the Upper East Side, just north of 59th Street Bridge. Roosevelt Island. So you're looking towards Roosevelt Island over into the East River. And then we have Murray Hill to to the south there, a little bit further south, but I think that goes up to like 42nd Street. Like you said, very quiet little neighborhood, not a lot of restaurants and bars and sort of nightlife there, but you do have all your services. And I would say our clientele that typically buys there has been people that are typically empty nester sort of time period in their life. A lot of people have homes out in Long Island, like out in the Hamptons or something like that, and it's an easy commute because you don't have to cross over through the island of Manhattan. So it knocks off 20 to 30 minutes off of a commute to get over out to their house. So it's a quick
Pied a terre.
Or pied a terre.
Yep. We have clients from Texas who have bought specifically in Sutton Place because, as you were describing, the proximity from LaGuardia Airport. It's a very, very quick commute from LaGuardia.
Yeah.
I think it's important to make sure that the audience knows that even though the neighborhoods are right next to each other, there is a definite difference of vibe between Sutton Place and Beekman Place.
Yeah.
And when I say vibe, there are, in terms of the architecture and the unit makeup in Sutton Place is just a far bigger neighborhood than Beekman.
Yeah.
I would say Beekman's probably one of the smallest neighborhoods in Manhattan.
It's got to be the smallest.
I would think that it's the smallest neighborhood. Yeah. And it's a real.
I'm going to go out on a limb and confirm that.
I think we're going to just say that.
Yeah.
Okay. But
it is what it is.
Sutton has a lot of post-war cooperatives and a lot of units. They're big co-ops over there.
Yeah.
And then you'll have these beautiful pre-war co-ops like 2 Sutton Place South. And then along the 57th Street corridor, really pretty pre-war co-op, mostly co-op with a smattering of condominium.
Yeah.
And so in comparison to Beekman Place, do you want to just talk about the unit makeup there?
Yeah, Beekman Place has some of the most iconic buildings in the city. As I mentioned, the River House, which is on the eastern, on the water at on 52nd Street. You've got the Campanile. You've got One Beekman Place, which is like was the place to be. With tons of celebrities and iconic residents that have lived there. So a lot of the old pre-war beautiful buildings in the area, some interesting townhouses,
yes,
and such, and
who would you say that it attracts, Beekman Place?
Well, Beekman Place, so you sit right just north of the UN, so you have some UN people that have owned there. That have lived there, politicians that have lived there,
missions. They have those houses.
Yep, that have a lot of consulates in the area. So that stretches well, like many neighborhoods. If you have something between First and Second Avenue, people will claim Sutton or Beekman area just to sort of give it a little bit different flavor versus Midtown East, so it sounds a little better, I guess. But a lot of different consulates in the area, and parking, which makes parking in the area quite challenging because a lot of diplomat parking. And then also really gums up the traffic when the UN is in session. So that's a nightmare. If the UN's in session, the president's in town and speaking at the UN, that whole eastern corridor gets really shut down. So it makes traffic kind of throughout the whole eastern side of Manhattan a challenge. So
Sutton Place attracts, as we talked about, a certain caliber of buyer, and a buyer who likes that quiet nature of the neighborhood. Restaurants, you don't have restaurants actually in Sutton Place or in Beekman Place. But remember what we talked about, on First Avenue, you're going to have restaurants.
yeah,
So for
or just
instance,
west of First Avenue. Yeah.
right, and then between First and Second, for instance, Mr. Chow on 57th, one of the top restaurants over there. But then neighborhood restaurants, you have to find them, like Deux Amis in Beekman Place, La Valletta in Beekman Place. And then but you have to go further north into the East 50s, like Dawat and Falidia and some of the top restaurants over there. They're just not sandwiched in there. But your favorite where you go when you're there is Nero's, right?
Near Ease.
Okay, you say Neri, I say Nero.
No, it's this old little Irish
Oh,
pub, and we had a client that frequented there all the time, and still does, I'm sure, because he's back in the neighborhood. Lovely, lovely guy, and it's just this little hole in the wall, but they have great food actually. So I've had a burger there, and
I would also surmise they'll have great booze.
they do have, I'm sure. I mean, I if I maybe had a beer with my lunch, but yeah, there's Ama, which is a great Indian restaurant on 51st. And now let's see, maybe about I would say 4 or 5 years ago, Whole Foods opened up a location on 57th Street, which is, it sounds silly, but in New York, when you get some major flagship or big, like well-known and superbly run grocer in the area, like it has
Transforms
a
it.
huge effect. And it's all the people talk about in the neighborhood, like, oh, and you don't forget you have Whole Foods right here. But it
Sure.
really does, because that convenience of going to a major grocery store like that, especially with Whole Foods, where they have the dining spaces in there where you can pick up food that's already made and stuff, and you've got all the organic section, et cetera. Like, it really is transformative and has made a major impact on the area, because before that, there was only the one grocery store that was under the 59th Street Bridge, which did not last. I think it came in and out in a matter of years.
One thing that I think is very important for people listening to the podcast, in terms of, you mentioned it when you talked about Neary's. There's some mom and pop shops over there. There are some little tiny neighborhood restaurants that it's important. They may not be Mr. Chow or Felidia, but for instance, I have to say, there is the most loveliest florist on First Avenue between 51st and 52nd Street, east side of the street. I forget the name, but it's those kinds of and a great diner as well. Again, is it Sutton Diner or something? Remember, I have a feeling, Jonathan, that's where you and I first had breakfast, was at that diner. I could be wrong, but it's on First Avenue between 51st, 52nd, or 52nd, 53rd. My point is that you got to look for them.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
what makes it it's a quaint little neighborhoody type area. People use that
With some expensive real estate.
with some expensive real estate, especially because you have these amazing river views, and the way that the city sort of cuts into itself, cuts in west. You get actually some southern facing windows, especially in that building, the Campanile, just south of the River House there on 52nd Street. Remember Greta Garbo's apartment? I think both of us saw that apartment at one point, because we had somebody that was looking at it. And you have this that faces south, and and it's basically over the river there. It's really an interesting perspective on the city. I mean, it's one of the many things that I love about the job is seeing the city from so many different perspectives. Sutton Place and Beekman Place give you, a real interesting view of like the Pepsi sign and the whole
Sure.
Long Island City development there that's just blown up with all those skyscrapers and the front parks on the riverfront there. Cornell Tech redeveloped the southern tip of Roosevelt Island that Sutton and Beekman are looking right at, and they put in the Franklin D. Roosevelt Four Freedoms State Park there at the very tip, which is it just makes it so it was totally run down, and that end of the island was never really used, and it's really beautified the view there over towards Queens. So it was interesting to see that all develop, and it's a beautiful beautiful perspective on the river and such, which sometimes doesn't
I'd like to I'd like to jump in and talk
do
about the
that.
celebrities and the note people of notoriety who have made Sutton and Beekman their home. And that's what's really kind of, I would say, very, very special because, you know, in our business, the Upper East Side has such a cachet, Park Avenue and Fifth Avenue. And over the years, Sutton Place, which is very, very special and very unique, great apartments, it's been kind of like the stepchild a little bit to those prime areas, but yet really great. So you'll have a lot of well-known people who have made Sutton, for instance, their home. Everybody from Marilyn Monroe and Bill Blass, Bobby Short, the pianist, to in Sutton, Freddie Mercury, Michael Jackson. I love the fact that you have very well-known, not only iconic figures who lived there, but a lot of really prominent New Yorkers made Sutton their home.
Yeah. So in Beekman, you have Henry Kissinger. You've got the Beekman family, obviously, the Vanderbilts.
At
Um,
River House. Diane Keaton, Joan Crawford. One thing about Beekman is that it was the backdrop for a lot of wonderful motion pictures. Bonfire of the Vanities, and then yes,
on Fire of the Vanities. When's that?
yes. Remember
Is
from
that from the
Tom Hanks and
1800s?
Melanie Griffith, and then I'm dating myself. You're right. You were little kids, but none other than Auntie Mame, well before all of our time, but Rosalind Russell lived in Beekman Place. And you don't know that, but it was a huge hit.
Yeah, and they're still working. I mean, there's not a lot of parks in the area, but there is some green space on the riverfront up in 56, 57th Street. They have a little promenade area in the back of the buildings there before. It's 25 and 45 Sutton that are south of 56th Street that are built right up to the waterfront. And they're working on developing the promenade that's going to be a running path that's going to go from 125th Street all the way down around the island and up the Upper West Side. But there's still a gap there. They're saying now that's going to be completed by 2024. And then you'll literally be able to run the whole perimeter of Manhattan Island from 125th, I think, to 125th, but perhaps
That's very, very important because there's those paths that you can take your dog down to
yeah,
walk the dog. You can
at
run,
the end of
jog.
52nd Street, right? Yeah,
Pardon me, at 52nd. Yeah,
the end of 52nd Street. Yeah, there's
that's
a
correct. And
dog
then in
park and stuff.
Sutton, I forget the street that allows you to do that as well in Sutton Place. In terms of transportation, it can feel a little bit isolated over there and yet not. So you have a lot of the the bus routes will run down first. I'm sorry, down second and up first. And then the nearest trains are going to be a little bit further. So you'll have the R, the Q, the R, the N, and the 6 train in both of those neighborhoods. That's kind of the farthest walk.
The E and the M as well, because they come in 53rd Street.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah. And
So
then the only other thing I think that it's important in terms of schooling over there. Do you want to dive into the
Well,
schools?
there's a number of schools that are in the area, and as usual, we're always touchy about mentioning which schools and blah blah blah. But good public schools, good, I mean, there are always good rated schools. There's some private schools in the area, and we'll put that all in the show notes, so people can see what's kind of in that little corridor and close to that corridor. I would say that Beekman and Sutton have their own following, and it just kind of depends. I mean, a lot of people. I sold an apartment to people, a young family, on far east 57th Street, between Sutton and First Avenue, and so you do get a mix, but like they know it because the parents happen to
Correct.
live just down the street. They live in the area, so, and she grew up in the area, so
The neighborhoods are generational.
they are generational. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
Beekman is referenced in a lot of different movies. So you have, Billy Joel making it famous in Glass Houses, and then Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt coming from a descendant of the Beekman family, and then My Beloved Auntie Mame. There's only one Mame Dennis.
There is this air of, I would say, especially in Beekman, of because
Old
there's
money.
been these really people of note that have lived there, whether they're prominent politicians or movie stars or what have you. But there's like an air of anonymity there, where
Correct.
like one Beekman, for up until recently you couldn't use the address at all in any marketing from when it comes to real estate. And there's these very interesting old clubs like the River Club, which is in the lower half of the River House, what used to be a boathouse, where boats would pull up to it. It went right up to the river, and the boats would, before they built the FDR, and it was a marina, and a boat club. So there's
People love the privacy.
yeah, people love the privacy. Now these are, especially one Beekman and River House, these old money sort of and very private clubs that people have to really fight their way into. You have to be in the right social circles, etc. It's one of the challenges. I mean, we get that across the city in different co-ops and such, Fifth Avenue, etc. But Beekman and Sutton are certainly no stranger to that, where it's more of a private club sort of feeling. So,
What about the history of Sutton Place?
So Sutton got its name from the Sutton family, which originally built some brownstones between 57th and 58th Street, which I unfortunately have not had the pleasure of being in, but look really fantastic. These townhouses that have their backyard right overlooking the river. There were others that built a few other townhouses there, but that was the start. It's been featured in some classics and some films and such, like the Catcher in the Rye and such, but has mainly, and I think because of the exclusivity to the areas, has avoided any sort of mass publication or mass publicity wrapped around the locations, because people generally go there. They like the quietness of the neighborhood, and they like the small enclave sort of feeling, which they both have.
In terms of the real estate, and
Yeah.
I agree with you, I think that it's very important to note that most of the buildings over there, with the exception of the houses, are ultra luxury full service cooperatives. So you have a lot of staff over there. Each and every building has tremendous amounts of doormen and concierge and
Door staff.
a lot of staff. Yes. So, and the real estate, you can get some extremely good values over there. Now, in some of obviously the most established co-ops, you're gonna pay up for those apartments, but again, relatively speaking to Park Avenue and Fifth Avenue, there's some very good values over there. It's just going to be a matter of whether you can reconcile being that far east versus closer to Central Park. So,
yeah.
But we love the neighborhoods. We're well versed in them. And I would suggest anybody that wants to look for a home in there in Sutton Place or sell their apartment. We've sold a lot of homes over there.
Yeah.
We're your team. How about that?
That's a great plug. I like that.
I thought it was a very good plug for us. So with that, Mr. Conlon,
good to talk to you, Joe.
I just think our podcast, John and Jonathan Sell NYC.com. No, that's our website. John and Jonathan Sell NYC gets better and richer because it involves me being next to you, even though we're not next to each other.
Virtually, anyways.
So with that, thank you all for watching.
Stay
I think we
safe.
did it. Do you have anything else to say?
Stay safe, stay healthy.
Healthy, safe, and most of all, remain in gratitude. Thanks so much. We will see you right back here next week, right?
That's right. We'll be here.
Good vibes.
Thanks for watching or listening to the John and Jonathan Sell NYC podcast. If you want to find us online or sign up to get our monthly and quarterly market stats, come on over to our website, johnandjonathansellnyc.com, or find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and everywhere else with the handle @JohnandJonathanSellNYC. And if you want to grab the show notes, go to johnandjonathansellnyc.com/podcast. If this show was entertaining, helpful, or informative, consider telling friends or family or leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. Those are some of the best ways of supporting our efforts, and we would greatly appreciate it. Thank you again for tuning in. We can't wait to share what's coming up next, so subscribe to the podcast to make sure you don't miss our next episode, and we'll see you next time.